Stalingrad, 1942. Vasily Zaitsev and his small team of just 4 snipers began a methodical hunt that would last 4 months. In that period, Zaitsev's 4 snipers killed 1,126 German soldiers, nearly 300 deaths per man. A silent massacre. The Wehrmacht responded with fury, created dedicated anti-sniper units, sent their best marksmen to hunt Zaitsev, implemented immediate suppression protocols after each detected shot. And it worked. Not against Zaitsev specifically, he survived, but against Soviet snipers in general. Average life expectancy dropped to 6 to 8 weeks. Total mortality rate, 75%. For every Zaitsev who lived to tell his story, 3 snipers died anonymously. So if even Zaitsev's elite group operated under these brutal conditions, what happened to the common snipers, those trained for 2 weeks and sent straight into the frozen hell of Stalingrad? For decades, we've celebrated World War II's greatest snipers as legendary killers. Names like Vasily Zaitsev, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, Simo Heiha. We've made movies about them, written books, built monuments, and every word of praise is deserved. These were extraordinary soldiers who accomplished the impossible. But here's what the history books don't tell you. They were the lucky ones. Of the 2,000 female snipers trained by the Soviet Union during World War II, 1,500 died in combat. That's not a typo. 1,500 women, 3 out of every 4 never came home. They were 18, 19, 20 years old, trained for 2 to 4 weeks, sent to the front, dead within 6 to 8 weeks. Let that sink in. A 75% mortality rate. Compare that to other roles. B-17 bomber crews had a 51% mortality rate. Frontline officers had around 65%. Even in the meat grinder of Stalingrad itself, where infantry casualties reached 90%, the difference was that most infantrymen died quickly, in hours or days. Snipers lasted weeks, which meant weeks of being hunted. Weeks of knowing that every time you pulled the trigger, you painted a target on your own back. This isn't a story about failure. This is a story about the 75% we forgot. The ordinary men and women who did extraordinary things under impossible circumstances and died before they could become legends. Let's start where the legend begins. Stalingrad. August 23, 1942. The Germans launched their assault on what would become the bloodiest battle in human history. For 163 days, 2 armies would tear each other apart in the ruins of a burning city. By the time it ended on February 2, 1943, 750,000 Soviet soldiers would be dead or wounded. 400,000 Germans would never leave. And somewhere in the middle of that hell, 98 Soviet snipers from the 13th Guards Division would kill 3,879 German soldiers in just 4 months. Think about that number. 98 men, nearly 4,000 confirmed kills. That's an average of 40 kills per sniper in 4 months. Vasily Zaitsev's personal group, just 4 snipers, accounted for 1,126 of those deaths. But here's what they don't tell you in the movies. Zaitsev himself only killed 242 men. His teammate Nikolai Ilyin killed 496. That's more than twice as many. Pyotr Goncharov killed 380. Viktor Medvedev killed 342. Zaitsev wasn't the deadliest shot. He was the leader, the organizer, the teacher. And that's actually more important than the body count. Because what Zaitsev understood, what kept him and some of his men alive, was that lone wolf snipers died fast. Before Zaitsev reorganized them, Soviet snipers worked alone. They'd find a position, start shooting, and within hours or days, German counter-sniper teams would triangulate their position and kill them. It was a suicide mission with a stopwatch. So Zaitsev did something revolutionary. He organized his snipers into groups of 6, 3 pairs. Each pair covered the other. If one man fired, his partner watched for muzzle flashes from enemy positions. They moved together, survived together, and crucially, they trained together. That training made all the difference. But even with superior tactics, even with Zaitsev's genius for organization, the math was brutal. Conservative estimates suggest that over 10,000 German soldiers were killed by Soviet snipers during the 163 days of Stalingrad. Hundreds of snipers contributed to that total, and most of them didn't live long enough to see the Soviet flag raised over the ruins. But if Stalingrad was hell for snipers, Sevastopol was worse. October 1941 to June 1942, 8 months of siege. This is where Lyudmila Pavlichenko became a legend, and where she almost died like the other 1,500 women who weren't lucky enough to be evacuated. Pavlichenko arrived in Sevastopol in October 1941, fresh from the evacuation of Odessa, where she'd killed 187 men in just 2.5 months. She was 24 years old, a university student studying history, planning to be a teacher. Instead, she'd become the deadliest female sniper in recorded history. By May 1942, her confirmed kill count stood at 257. By June, it was 309. 36 of those were enemy snipers, men sent specifically to hunt her. One duel lasted 3 days, 3 days of 15 to 20-hour shifts, lying in the same position, waiting for her opponent to make one fatal mistake. He did. She didn't. The Germans knew her name. They broadcast messages over loudspeakers. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, come over to us. We will give you plenty of chocolate and make you a German officer. When she didn't respond, the threats came. If we catch you, we will tear you into 309 pieces and scatter you to the wind. They knew her exact kill count. She was pleased by that. But here's what saved Lyudmila Pavlichenko. In June 1942, a mortar shell exploded near her position. Shrapnel tore through her face. The wound was severe enough that she was evacuated by submarine, the only way out of besieged Sevastopol. She was hospitalized for a month, and when she recovered, the Soviet High Command made a decision. She was too valuable to return to combat. Too valuable. Think about what that means. At 25 years old, with 309 confirmed kills, having survived 10 months of continuous combat, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was declared too important to risk losing. So they pulled her from the front, sent her to the United States on a propaganda tour with Eleanor Roosevelt, and made her a trainer instead of a trigger puller. She lived. She survived the war, she completed her university degree, became a historian, lived to age 58. But she was one of 2,000 women trained as snipers. Only 500 of them survived. 1,500 died because no one declared them too valuable. They just kept fighting until a bullet or a shell found them. In Sevastopol alone, before Pavlichenko was evacuated, dozens of those women died. Young volunteers, farm girls who could shoot, university students like Pavlichenko, trained for a few weeks, handed a Mosin Nagant rifle and sent into the meat grinder of urban siege warfare. And here's the thing that makes it even worse. They were good. They were effective. The women snipers of Sevastopol killed so many Germans that in April 1942 the Wehrmacht changed their entire sniper doctrine. They sent their best marksmen specifically to hunt the Soviet snipers. They broadcast on the radio that Sevastopol's snipers would be eliminated. It worked. Not completely. Pavlichenko survived long enough to be evacuated, but the mortality rate tells the real story. 75% died. Now, you might be wondering, why were snipers dying at such horrific rates? If they were so effective, if they were killing Germans by the hundreds, why couldn't they protect themselves? The answer is simple. The Germans adapted, and they adapted fast. In 1941, when the war began, Wehrmacht troops weren't prepared for the Soviet sniper threat. They moved carelessly, smoked cigarettes in the open, stood up to survey terrain, and Soviet snipers, many of them hunters and marksmen from before the war, picked them off with ease. But by mid-1942, everything changed. The Germans created dedicated anti-sniper teams. They developed doctrine, they trained specialists, and most importantly, they learned to suppress sniper positions immediately after a shot was fired. Here's how it worked. The moment a Soviet sniper fired, German troops would watch for the muzzle flash or listen for the direction of the shot. Within seconds, literally seconds, they'd pour machine gun fire and mortar rounds onto that position. It didn't matter if they could see the sniper. They'd saturate the area with lead until either the sniper died or was forced to retreat. And here's the cruel mathematics of it. A sniper might spend hours finding the perfect position. Hours of patience, of stillness, of waiting. They'd take their shot, one shot, and then have maybe 30 seconds to abandon that position before it was obliterated. If you moved fast enough, you lived. If you hesitated, if you tried for a second shot, if you froze for even a moment, you died. This is why Zaitsev's group tactics worked. Having a partner meant someone was always watching for the enemy response. Having a team meant you could lay down suppressing fire while your partner displaced. Solo snipers didn't have that luxury. They fired, they ran, and they hoped. Most of them didn't run fast enough. And even if you survived the immediate counterfire, there was another problem. You were now a marked position. The Germans would send their own snipers to watch that area. They'd send patrols. They'd set up kill zones and wait for you to return. Because good sniper positions were limited in cities like Stalingrad and Sevastopol, you couldn't just shoot from anywhere. You needed clear fields of fire, covered approaches, escape routes. There were only so many good positions, and the Germans knew them all. So you'd find a new position, kill another German, get suppressed again, move again. And with every shot, every displacement, every near miss, the odds got worse. The average Soviet sniper lasted 6 to 8 weeks before being killed or wounded. 6 to 8 weeks of this routine, day after day. Shot, suppression, move. Shot, suppression, move. Until eventually you moved a half second too slow, or a German sniper read your pattern, or random artillery happened to land on your position. Even Simo Häyhä, the White Death, the deadliest sniper in history with over 500 confirmed kills, nearly died from random artillery fire, not from enemy snipers. The best shooter in the world, with every advantage, operating on home terrain in defensive positions, still got his jaw blown off by an exploding bullet on March 6, 1940. He survived, barely, but he was lucky. Luck played as big a role as skill, so when we talk about the 75% who died, We're not talking about soldiers who failed. We're talking about soldiers who succeeded over and over until the numbers caught up with them. Let me put it in perspective. Lyudmila Pavlichenko killed 309 men in 10 months of combat. That's roughly 1 kill per day. Sounds extraordinary, right? It was. But here's the other side of that equation. She was shot at thousands of times. She survived 4 separate wounds. She endured mortar barrages, sniper duels, urban combat where the enemy was sometimes 50 meters away. She watched her husband, also a sniper, die from shrapnel wounds in March 1942, just months after they married. Every single day for 10 months, she played Russian roulette with German counter-snipers, machine gunners, mortar teams, and random artillery. And the only reason she's a legend instead of a statistic is because she got lucky one final time. The shrapnel that hit her face in June 1942 didn't kill her, and her commanders decided she was too valuable to risk again. Most snipers didn't get that second chance. The 1,500 women who died, the hundreds of men who died in Stalingrad, the countless snipers who were killed in battles we don't even have records for, they didn't fail. They succeeded right up until the moment they didn't. And in warfare, you only have to fail once. So were they useless? Is that 75% mortality rate evidence that the Soviet sniper program was a failure? Absolutely not. Here's why. First, the raw numbers. 10,000 Germans killed by snipers in Stalingrad alone. Thousands more in Sevastopol, Odessa, Leningrad, and 100 other battles. Each one of those kills removed a soldier from the battlefield, disrupted operations, forced the Germans to divert resources to counter-sniper operations, created psychological terror that reduced enemy effectiveness across entire units. When German soldiers knew there were snipers watching, they moved differently. They stayed low, they avoided exposure, they wasted time being cautious instead of being aggressive. That has a measurable tactical value that goes far beyond the body count. Second, training multiplication. Both Zaitsev and Pavlichenko trained new snipers even while they were in combat. Pavlichenko personally trained enough snipers that her students accounted for over 100 additional enemy kills during Sevastopol. Zaitsev's entire group structure was designed to train novices by pairing them with experienced shooters. The 75% who died weren't just casualties. They were buying time and creating knowledge for the 25% who survived. And those survivors became the next generation of trainers. Third, strategic impact. Adolf Hitler himself noted the effectiveness of Soviet snipers, the terror they inflicted, the casualties they caused, the disruption they created. All of it fed into Hitler's growing belief that the Soviet Union was more resilient than he'd anticipated. That belief influenced German strategy, made them more cautious, cost them momentum at critical moments. You can draw a direct line from the sniper terror at Stalingrad to Hitler's decision-making in subsequent campaigns. Not because snipers won the war, they didn't, but because they were one of 1,000 small factors that cumulatively bled the Wehrmacht white. Now compare that to modern snipers. Today, military snipers have a 5 to 10% mortality rate. That's right, modern snipers are 7 to 15 times more likely to survive than their World War II counterparts. Why? Better training, better equipment, better doctrine, air support, advanced optics, drones for reconnaissance, radio communication, Kevlar armor, medical evacuation. And every single one of those improvements was built on lessons learned from World War II, from watching 75% of snipers die and asking, how do we fix this? The Soviet snipers of 1941 to 1945 were test cases. They were learning in real time how to fight a new kind of war: urban warfare, counter-sniper warfare, psychological warfare, and yes, 75% of them died in the process of learning those lessons. But their deaths weren't meaningless. They bought knowledge with blood. Here's what we owe them: memory. Not just memory of the legends, the Zaitsevs and Pavlichenkos who lived long enough to become heroes, but memory of the 18-year-old farm boy who made it through 2 weeks of training, killed 5 Germans in his first week on the line, and died in his second week when a mortar round found his hide. Memory of the 20-year-old woman who volunteered after her village was destroyed, who learned to shoot in 3 weeks, who killed 12 enemy soldiers before a sniper duel she couldn't win. Memory of the thousands of nameless snipers who never lived long enough to accumulate the kill counts that make history books, who did their jobs, did them well, and died doing them. We don't know their names, we don't have their statistics, but we have the aggregate: 75% mortality rate, 1,500 dead out of 2,000 trained. And despite those losses, they helped win the war. On December 15th, 1991, Vasily Zaitsev died in Kiev just days before the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. He was 65 years old. He'd requested to be buried at Mamayev Kurgan in Volgograd, the hill overlooking Stalingrad where 35,000 defenders were buried. It took 15 years, but in 2006 his remains were reinterred there with full military honours. He lies now among the men who fought beside him, including many of the snipers who didn't survive to see victory. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died on October 10, 1974, at age 58. A stroke, likely related to her wartime injuries and the PTSD she carried for 3 decades. She was buried at Novodevichy Cemetery in Moscow. In 1943, the Soviet Union issued a commemorative postage stamp with her image. They issued another in 1976. She remains the only female sniper honoured that way. These were the lucky ones. They lived. They got monuments. They got stamps. They got movies made about them. But he'd stand at Mamayev Kurgan today at the memorial to Stalingrad's defenders, and you're standing above the graves of 35,000 Soviet soldiers. Many of them were snipers. Most of them never got their names recorded. They're just part of the aggregate, part of the 750,000 Soviet casualties from that battle. Or visit the mass graves around Sevastopol. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers buried there. Among them, dozens, maybe hundreds, of the 1,500 female snipers who died during the war. They were teenagers, students, farm girls, hunters, ordinary people who learned to do something extraordinary, did it for 6 to 8 weeks, and died anonymously. Were they useless? Ask the 10,000 Germans who died at Stalingrad. Ask the thousands more who died at Sevastopol, Odessa, Leningrad, and everywhere else Soviet snipers operated. Ask the Wehrmacht commanders who had to completely restructure their tactical doctrine to counter the sniper threat. Ask Adolf Hitler, who noted the terror Soviet snipers inflicted. They'd tell you these snipers were anything but useless. The truth is this: World War II snipers accomplished the impossible under impossible circumstances. 3 out of 4 died trying, but they died forward. They died effective. They died having made a difference. And that's not a story of uselessness. That's a story of sacrifice, of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, given minimal training, handed a rifle, and told to hold the line. Most of them died holding it. But because they died holding it, the line held. We remember Zaitsev. We remember Pavlichenko. We should. They earned it. But we also need to remember the 3 unnamed snipers who died for every one legend who survived. Because without those 3, without their sacrifice, their kills, their 6 to 8 weeks of fighting before a bullet found them, the legends never would have had time to become legendary. 75% mortality rate, 1,500 dead out of 2,000 trained, 6 to 8 weeks average survival time. Those aren't failure statistics. Those are the numbers of soldiers who knew the odds, went anyway, and did their jobs until they couldn't anymore. That's not useless. That's heroic. And they deserve to be remembered not as the ones who failed to survive, but as the ones who succeeded at the only thing that mattered, standing between their people and annihilation for as long as they possibly could. Most of them, it turned out, could stand for about 6 weeks. For some, that was enough to change history. For all of them, it was enough to deserve our memory.